The first thing I remember is the silence. You could have heard a pin drop, if not for the way Richard Thompson's voice split the air. All booming indignation and privilege. "I want off this plane. Right now," he shouted. Fists clenched. Face red as an exit sign. Passengers turned in their seats. Phones hovering just low enough to not get caught. Capturing every second of the mess he'd started. That was the moment I realized. This wasn't just about a seat. This was about respect. And I wasn't going to let him steal that from me, no matter who was watching, or how loudly he yelled. You probably want to know how I ended up in the middle of all this. Me, Olivia Bennett, CEO of Skyline Air. I didn't always wear nice suits and carry a leather tote. Truth is, I grew up in a cramped apartment on the south side of Dallas, dreaming of just getting out. My parents worked double shifts so I could have a chance. Somehow, against the odds. I climbed all the way to the top. But in that moment, none of it seemed to matter. Let me back up. I'd just finished a brutal board meeting, one of those days where every word feels like a negotiation. My mind was already on the presentation I'd have to give in San Francisco that evening. I was tired, yeah, but I was also proud. I'd earned every step to this first-class cabin, and for once, I was going to enjoy a quiet flight. Except fate had other plans. I stepped into the cabin, scanning for my seat, 1E window, just how I like it. I set my bag down, about to take out my laptop, when I heard it. That voice. "Excuse me, I need this entire row to rest." I turned around, surprised, and met Richard's eyes. He was maybe in his late 50s, sharp suit, salt, and pepper hair. The kind of guy who wore his confidence like a tailored overcoat. He tossed a gray blanket across not just one, but 2 seats, mine included. "Surely you can find somewhere else to sit, if you even have a ticket," he added, flashing me a smirk like he was doing me a favor. I stared at him for a second, thinking maybe he'd realized his mistake. But no, this wasn't a misunderstanding. He barely glanced at my boarding pass when I held it up. "You're mistaken," he grumbled. "People like me deserve this space. You'd do well to move along." There's something about being insulted in front of strangers that makes your heart pound out of your chest. My mouth went dry. Part of me wanted to laugh at the absurdity. Another part, a deeper, older part, just felt tired. Tired of having to prove I belonged, no matter how far I'd come. I kept my voice even, though my hands trembled. "This is my seat," I said, and held up the digital pass, as clear as daylight. He didn't care, arms crossed. He gave me that look, half boredom, half contempt. "People like you don't belong here," he snapped. I'd heard those words before, in different ways and places, since I was a kid. But there's nothing quite like being told, flat out, "You're not welcome, on your own airline, in a seat you paid for." By a man who'd never know a day of doubt. The cabin went quiet. I could feel the eyes, the tension. No one spoke up. Not yet. Instead, I got a few polite, awkward smiles from the flight crew, maybe a hint of sympathy in their eyes. But no one wanted to get involved. Not with someone like him. Richard didn't let up. Let me make this perfectly clear. This is my section. I paid a lot of money to rest in comfort, not to be bothered by people beneath my class. The words stung, but I wasn't about to move. Not this time. "Mr. Thompson," I said, deliberately, so he knew I knew exactly who he was. "I'm asking you, politely, to respect the boarding process. This is my assigned seat." He scoffed, loud enough for the whole cabin. "Oh, equality," he mocked. I don't think you even understand the meaning of that word. People like you always see yourselves as victims. I looked at him, and for a second, I thought maybe I should just sit somewhere else. Was it worth it? Would it really matter if I let it go? Just this once? My mind raced through every scenario. Headlines, complaints, the possibility that I'd just be written off as another angry black woman making a scene. I remembered my parents, how many times they'd been told to just be grateful, to let things slide. I remembered my own first day in a boardroom, being mistaken for someone's assistant. I remembered every slur, every slight, every time I'd swallowed my pride for the sake of peace. But then, something in me snapped. Not with rage, no. It was quieter than that. It was resolve. I'd come too far to let someone like Richard Thompson push me aside. Not here, not now. Still, the longer I stood my ground, the uglier it got. The flight attendant, Emily, finally stepped in. "Sir, we really need to stick to our assigned seats," she said, her voice polite but firm. Richard barely looked at her. "I already told you I have a medical condition. I'm not moving." Emily looked at me, apologetic, hands tied by protocol and fear of making things worse. I could see the defeat in her eyes. She wanted to help, but couldn't or wouldn't push him. The minutes dragged. Passengers started whispering, some shaking their heads, others filming. I could feel myself shrinking inside, wondering if I was just making it worse for everyone. Was this seat really worth the headache? That's when it happened. A younger man across the aisle suddenly called out, "Wait, isn't that Olivia Bennett, the CEO of Skyline Air?" The words rippled through the cabin. Heads turned, eyes widened. Richard looked confused for a split second, then doubled down. "CEO or not, I don't care, whoever she is. She's not making me move." He was all bluff and bluster, still convinced his money and power made him untouchable. I just gave a half-smile, one I'd practiced through 1,000 confrontations, and quietly reached for my phone. What Richard didn't know was that I'd helped develop a protocol for exactly this kind of situation. A discreet message. A single code sent to our operations team. Operation Clear Skies. Less than a minute later, Richard's phone lost its why. He tried to reconnect, frowning, tapping, then growing visibly irritated as every attempt failed. Around him, other passengers glanced up, realizing something had shifted. His power was slipping, and for the first time, he looked nervous. But Richard was nothing if not stubborn. He glared at me, then at the crew. "I want off this plane right now," he shouted, voice cracking under the pressure. He jumped to his feet, nearly knocking over his own coffee. "You have no right to keep me here. Don't you know who I am? I'll sue this airline and her, too." The lead flight attendant, Kevin, stepped in, solid, calm, and suddenly in control. "Sir, please sit down. We're under movement restriction," he said, his voice even but unyielding. Richard hesitated, anger pulsing through every muscle. But he saw the faces around him, passengers, staff, even the ones who'd ignored us before, now watching him, not with respect, but with barely disguised disgust. A woman nearby couldn't take it anymore. "You're the one hogging 2 seats and being rude," she said, her voice sharp and clear. "You're the problem here." Richard spun around, face red, ready to lash out. But he didn't, couldn't. He saw that the room, the whole world in that cabin, had turned against him. Even those who'd been silent before now nodded in agreement. He tried, weakly. To blame me, she started it. If it weren't for her, none of this would have happened. Nobody was buying it. The crowd, once indifferent, now rallied behind me, not out of admiration, but because they'd seen the truth of what was happening. That was when the real authority arrived. Alex Mason, Skyline's VP of Risk Management, had been watching from the galley. He strode over, calm but ice cold. "Mr. Thompson, this needs to end right now. Return to your assigned seat, or we'll be forced to take stronger measures." There was no mistaking the steel in Alex's voice, or the fact that he, not Richard, was the final word here. For a second, I saw panic flash in Richard's eyes. He got up, slowly, and slunk back to his assigned seat. The energy in the cabin shifted. No applause, no cheers, just a heavy, silent justice. I took my seat, feeling a mix of exhaustion and relief. I didn't look at Richard again. I didn't need to. He was a statue, face drained of color, jaw tight, staring out the window like he wished he could melt right through it. The plane touched down, and I could feel the story spreading even before I switched my phone back on. Videos, photos, hashtags. I'd become an accidental symbol. My phone pinged with notifications, media outlets, old friends, strangers sharing stories of the incident. And Richard? His name and face were everywhere. Two, only for him. It was a digital storm. Every law firm he called turned him away. His own board forced him out before sunset. He went home alone, stripped of power, reputation, and excuses. Not a single soul showed up to defend him. I didn't celebrate. I didn't need to. Justice, real justice, doesn't need a victory lap. I kept the boarding pass from that flight, seat 1E, on my desk as a quiet reminder of what it means to stand up, even when you want to shrink away. I won't lie. Sometimes I still think about that moment. The urge to back down, the doubt, the ache. But I know now that the line between dignity and defeat is only ever as thin as your willingness to speak up. So if you ever find yourself doubting, thinking you're alone, remember this: silence is its own kind of power, if you use it to hold your ground. And that's the real lesson, from me to you, here at JR.